Good morning, HASP scholars. Welcome to this month's presentation. First order of business, you know I do this every time. Please put your cell phones on silence. Otherwise, it's very disruptive to our speakers. I'd like to thank the monthly meeting committee for arranging to have Dave Koster come speak to us. They do a wonderful job. So David Blatt and Marilyn Schmidt, wherever you are out there, thank you for your, there they are, right there, for your hard work and your rest of your committee. My quote of the month, because you know I'd like to do this, is from Winston Churchill, because I cannot let my presidency end without quoting Churchill, even though it has nothing to do with power, at least public power. The price of greatness is responsibility. Winston Churchill, one of the most quotable people to ever walk this planet. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Dave Koster from the Holland Board of Public Works. Dave is general manager of the Board of Public Works, and he has been that since 2011. Is that right, Dave? He's a lifelong Holland resident. He's a graduate of Michigan Tech University with a degree in mechanical engineering. He's a chair of the board of the Michigan Public Power Agency, and he's a former member of the board of the American Board of Public Power Agency. The BPW oversees in Holland electricity, wastewater, the fiber internet, and potable water, tap water. So I'm not going to give you a speech for him. Please welcome Dave Koster.
Good morning. All right. I'm very excited to be here. I've done a number of talks to this group, both the large room as well as some of the different offerings in the classroom settings. And it's always a wonderful experience. You're a very engaging group. A lot of great questions, so I'm putting the pressure on you this morning right away. No, but it's just been a lovely experience, and so I really appreciate the opportunity to be back in front of you. You know, when you think about utilities, and sometimes people don't think a lot about utilities. You know, maybe you got up last night and got a glass of water, used the restroom, turned the light switch on, and didn't think about us at all. But all those things happened without, you know, any problem, and that's generally how we like it, right? Is that if you're not thinking about us, that means that things are running well. Well, it takes a lot in order for that to occur without a whole lot of hiccups. And so it's important that we do think about utilities because they are very important to quality of life and economic vitality of our community. And so I'm pleased to be able to be here this morning to take you through some of the things that are going on in the Holland area as it relates to utilities, across all of our functions that were mentioned, as well as spending a little bit more time diving more deeply into the area of energy. Because I know that's a very important topic, and especially in light of some of the mandates that have recently been put in place through legislation here in the state of Michigan. We have some challenges in front of us, both as a region and as a city. So with a little show of hands here, maybe before we get started, how many of you are customers of the Holland Board of Public Works? All right, that's exciting. First of all, thank you for being one of our customers, and again, we try to serve you with the most reliable, affordable, sustainable utility services that we can. We've been around for about 130 years now. Hard to believe, but back in 1893, rather, the community got together and decided that they wanted to take control of their energy destiny and actually form an electric utility. They had already done water for some time. They added into that some wastewater. And now, as we'll talk about a little bit later, we're really getting pretty heavily involved in broadband networks in our community. I'm proud to be able to serve with about 180 other members of our team in service to our community, providing those 4 utilities. And if you're in the city of Holland, you also have a single hauler for refuse, and we handle the billing and customer service for that. It's an appointed board, but we are a division of the city, so we are ultimately accountable to the city council, But there's a 5-member voting board and then 3 ex officios that actually sit and oversee and govern the BPW. And they are running it very much like enterprises, like businesses. So it's not political at all. We're trying to just do the best we can for all of our customers. We have some very major initiatives going on in each of the utilities that I'm going to touch on. I talked about the energy challenges that are in front of us. We're also building throughout the city of Holland. How many here live in the city of Holland? All right, so coming to a fiberhood near you very soon is our fiber optic services, so you'll have access to more than a gigabit. It's actually a 2 gigabit offering for broadband coming up. We've got some challenges ahead of us on the water utility, dealing with water demand management and some infrastructure needs there. And on the wastewater side, we're dealing with some of the struggles that we have by building an anaerobic digester, and I'll talk about what that means to us as well. Again, with the Holland BPW, our mission is to provide you with competitive, reliable, innovative public utility solutions to the greater Holland area in a socially, environmentally, and financially responsible manner. It's a lot of words there, but essentially what we're talking about is helping you with your utility needs and finding solutions, not just providing you with products and services, but actually trying to find the best overall solution for you. And sometimes that solution means using less of our products. Yes, we actually incentivize you at times to use less of our electricity, and we're going to be getting into some incentives that help you manage your water usage as well. Why? Ultimately, we want you to be as efficient in your usage of our products as you possibly can be. So our board did reaffirm this strategic mission just this last year, along with a vision statement that we will anticipate and respond to the customer needs with exceptional solutions for you that strengthens economic vitality in our community and the quality of life. And our board has focused and affirmed 7 critical issue areas that are important to achieving that success. That we work on customer solutions and value. How can we meet the customer's needs in the best possible way? How can we seek to provide new services and new offerings to our customers that enhance their utility experience? How can we mind the fiscal accountability of the utility? Being good stewards of the resources that you provide us. We're a not-for-profit entity. Every dollar that you spend goes back into the services that we're providing. So how can we make sure that we're ready for what's not only going on today, but the future? Because running a utility is a lot of new capital investment that's needed. So we need to make sure that we're planning for that renewal of that over time. How can we meet just not only the regulatory challenges, but be proactive in that process so we're bringing the best value possible to our community? And ultimately, the number one attribute that customers are looking for in their utility is reliable services. You want to make sure that when you turn that light switch on, when you turn that tap on, things are flowing and the water quality is good, the electricity quality is good, everything is operating well. And so reliability is a big focus. Sustainable stewardship. How can we go beyond just the financial evaluation of things to look at what's better for the social, economic, and environmental impacts to our community? We did that years ago, and we were deciding what to do for our next power generation resource when we shut down the DeYoung plant and moved off to that more natural gas, a cleaner fuel, and rolling in renewables. That was a community decision. That was a stakeholder process. How can we use those type of processes in everything that we do? Well, we have. Broadband was another way of bringing stakeholders to the table to decide what we should do as a community. Building an anaerobic digester is a way of being more sustainable in our processes as well. Workforce, how can we make sure that we are providing a culture and an environment where we want to be the employer of choice for those that are on our team? And then finally, our board is dedicated to good governance as well, making sure that they do their job well so that the team that's actually doing the actual work to implement the solutions is functioning as well as it possibly can. And how are we holding ourselves accountable? We're measuring. So every quarter, and you can see these on our publicly available packets, we look at key performance indicators that track how we're doing in each of these areas, and we report out to our board and to the public so you can see against benchmarks that are there, are we on track or do we have work to do? So it's a good process. It's a good process that we've set up. And again, some of the things that we are working on then in order to make sure that we're bringing some of these new values and solutions to the community roll into those 4 main utility functions. I mentioned broadband. We're very excited to be rolling out Holland City Fiber after a number of years of community engagement and input. And ultimately, the citizens of Holland got together in August of 2022, and you made a decision by way of a vote that said, yes, I'm willing to make a community-level investment to ensure that the network of fiber optics is built throughout our entire community and goes past every home and business so everybody in the city of Holland has access to high-speed broadband connectivity. That millage, then, that is going to be supporting the actual bonds that are going to be used to pay for the initial passings, about a $24 million investment. Those bonds have been sold, the funds have been raised, and the construction is just getting started at this point. Matter of fact, in January, we broke ground near Collin Park in order to get that done, and we are starting that work, and over the next 2 years, we'll be building out the fiber hoods throughout the city of Holland. And when I mention fiber hoods, that's because our community is actually divided up into about 15 different areas where there'll be a node of electronics, and then the fiber optics will run out of that node, home run from the electronics to each and every home and business that goes along the path in those fiber hoods. And as we get a construction done for each of those fiber hoods, you will then have an opportunity to decide if you want to actually have it connected from the street or the back lot into your house and start to receive service from that. So as you're starting to look forward to this coming into your area, know that we will be out there in front with indicators saying we are now in your neighborhood or we will soon be in your neighborhood. We'll be using door tags to let you know that construction activities are happening. We also have a website area dedicated to this, so today you can even go on there and say, hey, my address is interested in having fiber optic hooked up when you're in my neighborhood, so that we know that when that time comes that we're done deploying the fiber optic infrastructure past your house, that coming soon after that, we'll be bringing another firm in called ITG, the Fulfillment Services. They will actually run from the back lot or from the street to your house. They will set up the electronics on your house. Another team will then come and set up the electronics inside of your house, where you'll have up to 10 gigabit fiber optic available to you, but our base offering is about 2 gigabits, which again far exceeds anything that you'd be able to see from competitive offerings in that regard. Also excited to say that our city council has just approved a pricing plan for this. So if you were to receive the base service for fiber optics, $45 a month for 2 gigabit symmetrical service of broadband connectivity. If you want that 10 gig service because you just have a lot of needs and you really want to have that high-speed option, that's available to you as well. It'd be $125 a month for that. And that's for no data caps, no contracts, everything that would be involved there. No other fees for the actual router in your home. That all is covered within that $45. It also covers the cost of the drop to your home, so there's no installation cost on that. So again, it's very easy just to sign up, and then when we're in your area, we'll come and actually do that fulfillment service for you. So we're very excited about that. If you have a very large home, you can add some extenders to actually cover more from a Wi-Fi perspective in your home as well. A lot of the other things that are on this screen have to do more with business-type offerings. So that's a little bit about the broadband utility. In the water utility, some of the big challenges here in the water utility is actually peak demand of water usage. Now you think about it, Lake Michigan is right next to us, and sometimes people have a hard time thinking about that being a resource that has limitations or concerns associated with it. And yes, there is a lot of water there available for us, but what is more impacted here for Holland is the size of our treatment systems and delivery systems to bring that to our customers. If you look at the graph that's on the screen here, and hopefully from where you're at, yeah, you can see it pretty well. This is a frequency distribution graph looking at the number of days that the flow is exceeding a certain level, okay? And you can see that here, that at that 13 mark, right, that's kind of the average flow that we see over a year in the average flow per day, 1 million gallons per day of flow coming out of our water plant. Up at the upper end there, you can see that we do reach at times, close to 35, 36 million gallons per day. But that is only just a matter of a few days. And a lot of that has to do with temperature, because cooling water is used in businesses, and irrigation in the summertime. So water utilities have a lot of fixed costs. Building a new water plant is a very fixed cost solution, high capital intensive cost. But we use it very little in terms of that irrigation demand. So how can we be better stewards collectively as a community of the investment that we made and of the water in general, right? So there's some opportunities that we see to help our utility be very cost effective and to help everybody in the community be better stewards of the resource of the lake. And so we're going to be focusing on that coming up. Again, here's a graph showing why also we are facing this. What's magical about that flow levels that I was talking to you about? Our water plant has about a 38.5 million gallon per day treatment capacity. That's a regulated amount. The Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy looks at our infrastructure in the plant, and they rate our plant. They approve the rating for our plant. Once we get to about 80% of that on a maximum day in a year, we have to start planning for expansions. The Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, otherwise known as EGLE, they will say, hey, you really need to be in the process now of planning for that next expansion and upgrade. Once you hit a 90% level, and that's what these top two bars are really relating to, the 80% level and then 90%, they want you to be in construction. They want you to actually be executing something to give yourself more capacity so you don't run into a situation where you're going to be short. And so you can see that while our average demand is also going up, the trend line on that peak demand has been going up as well. But if we were to add on capacity for the water plant for just those few days of irrigation load, the costs that we would see are pretty significant. So we think that there's some alternatives that we can do here. And so part of it has to do with, are you even effective at how we're irrigating in the community? Can we be doing that in a better way? So there's some smart technology that can be employed to help in that regard. But there's also some things that we can do in terms of incentivizing and promoting some better options for plantings that we could put in our community as well. That maybe not everything that we have needs to be lush lawn that is mowed and continue to be watered and mowed and continue to be watered and mowed. So these are things that we've actually done, try to lead on it as well. Holland Energy Park has Michigan native plantings around the outside of the secure perimeter. Just this last year, our water plant also put in plantings of sustainable grasses and wildflowers at its facility. And we think that this is a model that could be used. There's a lot of businesses in town that have vast areas of lawn that possibly could be rethought from a landscaping perspective to cut down on some of that irrigation demand. But you also have some opportunities at a residential level to incorporate some better practices in that regard as well. We're also going to be looking at some tiered rates. Part of it is an affordability issue. Right now, if you look at a unified kind of rate structure for the commodity, those that are using very little water are ultimately helping to pay for those that are using large amounts of water for that irrigation demand. We think there might be some responsibility to do some things differently there, where we would start to split and have a base level of the commodity rate in the water that's a lower amount, and putting a little bit higher amount, so that if you are going to do that extra amount of watering, if you are going to say, I really want all acre of my property to be watered and mowed, that maybe there's some responsibility there that should be translated into the rate structure from a tiered rate perspective. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to change this relationship between the peak and the average to be something closer to about a 1.8 multiplier. Right now we're about a 2.2, meaning the peak is about 2.2 times higher than the average. If we can get down to that 1.8, if we can make that a goal, the amount of time that we have before we have to face an expansion of our water plant or other infrastructure to serve that goes out tremendously in terms of years. And that helps keep costs down and helps be better stewards then of the resources financially as well as the water resources in our community. In our water utility, we're also facing some infrastructure renewal needs. Many of you probably remember Flint from a lead exposure standpoint. What that brought about was a rule in the state of Michigan that applies to every public water system that's out there. And that rule says that you have to remove, in the next 20 years, and this started about 3 years ago, so about 17 years left, you have to remove every piece of lead service line in the community over that 20-year period of time. And you have to do it at the public water system's cost. So think about our structure in the city of Holland. The municipality owns up to the curb, and then the customer owns from the curb into the house. The rule requires the utility to actually pay for the entirety of that replacement. In Holland, we don't have full lead service lines, but we do have a number of services that are galvanized pipe, which is a very rigid pipe, and then it has about an 18-inch gooseneck between the water main and that galvanized line. And that 18-inch gooseneck qualifies the entirety of that line as a lead service line. Now, the good news is in Holland, we test our water regularly at the customer location for the presence of lead. We don't see that showing up in our water. And there's a reason for that, and that is because we have a very passive water source. You know, Lake Michigan does not promote the leaching of lead. In fact, it actually creates more of a coating on the pipe in a way that actually protects that from occurring. So we don't see that showing up, but even though it doesn't show up and is not leaching off, the mandate still remains. And that mandate is putting a lot of pressure financially on the utility. And so we are looking at going in, and this map here indicates where we have in the red, both the public side and the private side has to be replaced. And then there's the kind of the gold color that's there, the yellow, which is where years ago we went in and made changes on the public side, but we don't have record that the customer changed from the curb stop in. We still have to go in and take care of those as well. So when you're looking at making that kind of investment, the other issue that crops up is you're going to be in the road dealing with that. What if you have a water main that is running down that road that is approaching an age needing retirement or has shown some history of breaks in it? You don't want to necessarily dig up the road, do the service lines, and not address the distribution main at the same time. So we are in a process of evaluating what would be the impact of actually not only dealing with the service lines, but also dealing with the distribution infrastructure at the same time. Cash flow-wise, it is a big challenge. Our utility is likely going to need about a $7 million a year type of capital plan in order to achieve both things, both the lead service line replacements and these distribution lines, which will require us to have some rate adjustments ultimately in the water utility to deal with this. The good news is, here again, this graph shows throughout the state of Michigan, and Michigan actually has some of the lower water rates in the country, is that the Holland BPW is among the lowest of the water rates that you'd see in the city or in the state of Michigan. So there's some room to move there and still be very competitive, but just so you know, and there'll be information that's coming out, this is what's driving some of the needs that we have. And it's not that we wouldn't deal with these investments, but we might deal with the investments without the rule of the replacement of the lead service lines over a longer period of time than what we are forced to by being in the road to deal with those over the 17-year period that remains. In the wastewater utility, you know, some of the challenges that have occurred in the wastewater utility have to do with biosolids. Biosolids are a normal process of the wastewater treatment, or a normal outcome of the wastewater treatment process. Primary treatment and what's called secondary treatment, which is a biological treatment, actually yields sludge, essentially, or the solids out of the process that have to be dealt with, and we deal with those in one of two ways. One, we can actually dewater it. We can squeeze it and actually make it into like almost like a clay or a kind of that sort of feel to it, but it still has a lot of water in it yet. Or we can leave it more in an aqueous form, something to about 5 or 6% solids, and do an injection in farm fields for a nutrient adder. And we do that to the extent that we can. By the type of biosolids that we have, we're limited on the fields that we can go to and how we can apply it, because it's qualified as what's called a Class B biosolid. So it can't be used on fields that are growing crops that humans directly consume, but it can be used on fields that are growing things that are for livestock consumption or for other types of uses. Well, those costs have been escalating significantly, both in the land application as well as the landfill option. So if we squeeze it and dewater it, that usually has a destination going to a landfill. Landfills have been pushing back because it still has a lot of water content on it, and there's concerns from a safety standpoint that as that water leaches out, it starts to impact the stability of the landfill itself. And there's less dry waste going to these landfills as more people are recycling, which is good news. But that is a challenge then in mixing in some of the wet product. So what have we done? In City Holland, there's been an investment. You've seen it go up. People have had a big debate on whether it should be painted or not painted or what should be on it, right? That's been the hot topic around town. But it's the anaerobic digester. It's the egg-shaped device that's sitting now and actually is getting up and operating at this point. So we're very excited about it. What it does is it actually allows us to let me get ahead here a minute. So the anaerobic digester, what it does is it converts about 50% of those solids to methane. So we're actually able to take that and use it for heating and for power generation on site. And that's really a very renewable option for us. And at the same time, that's 50% less solids that either have to be dewatered or otherwise carried away and put on farm fields. The other thing that happens through that process is that we're killing a lot more pathogens than we otherwise would kill through our normal processes. And so we convert it from what's a Class B biosolid now into a Class A biosolid, which gives us a whole lot more options. We can actually, instead of going on fields that are only for livestock consumption, we can now put those on fields that are more for direct human consumption. We can also dispose of it on fields in a different way, different times of the year than we could otherwise. And so there's some really good things that are helping to avoid and mitigate costs that were associated with the biosolids disposal. The other good news is that the recently enacted federal act, the Inflation Reduction Act, now opens up opportunities for the municipality to have what has been enjoyed by private investors for years, which is a tax credit. Now, we are not taxed. So what we are actually able to do underneath the Inflation Reduction Act is we can file a tax return that still makes available to us a tax credit equivalent payment to the BPW. Now, if you look at the structure of that law, right off the bat, it's about a 30% tax credit for the base tax credit, and then on top of it, there's some incentive tax credits if it's domestic content, made in America type things, as well as the fact that we are close to what is called an energy community, where there's been a recently shut down coal plant. There's some additional incentives in there. So we may be anywhere between 40 and 50% tax credit on eligible expenses for this endeavor. And the digester was about a $30+ million investment, so this would be an infusion of maybe $8 to $10 million or so into the wastewater utility, which goes a long way to helping to mitigate some of the rate pressures that we would have. All right, so it's challenging enough in those other three utilities, right? There's a lot of things happening, a lot for us to do, but I know a lot of people here today were here to talk and hear a little bit more about energy. So I'm going to spend the rest of the talk really talking about where we are as a community, what progress we've made, and what we have to do in front of us, right? So The community energy plan. How many of you are familiar with our community energy plan? Okay, some of you are, and that's great. So again, this was a process of public engagement that occurred back in 2011. And back at that time, we formed a goal, really, as a community. And this goal was footed in what was called an energy prosperity plan, or an economic prosperity plan, really. We focus on carbon reduction as a community, but carbon really is a means of identifying efficiency, and efficiency is really a means of how to be as economically prosperous as possible. How can you do more with less resources? And so when we created that plan in 2011, we were focused on economic competitiveness, protecting the environment, and making sure that we could provide reliable and affordable energy. And we continue to be focused on that. The process this isn't a plan that goes on the shelf. It was a 40-year plan, but it's an actively worked plan where every few years there's a group that gets together. I'll call it our strategic development team. And there are people from the community, people from city council, people from our Board of Public Works. They get together and they hear what progress has been made, and they look at the state of the industry, and they recast new goals and new objectives for the staff of the city and the BPW to work on. Last time that was looked at back in 2021, just a couple of years ago, so we're getting close to renewal of that again here in 2024 or 25, is they said there are 5 areas, 5 levers that we can really pull and adjust what kind of impact we're having on our community. And they come in the way of what our electric portfolio is. So how green can we make our electric portfolio? That's the source of the electricity that you're consuming. But also the building environment that you're in, your residences, your businesses. How can they be more efficient at the use of energy, electricity and natural gas and other energy sources? So how can we reduce building energy consumption? What can we do in transportation? And that takes 2 forms. How can we reduce the vehicle miles traveled? And how can we think about the fuel sources that go into those vehicles in a way to make those more carbon effective and more efficient? And then education, educational opportunities. Today is one of those things that we're talking about, but other ways that we can help people. Sometimes people just don't know how to get started on this journey. It's a pretty complex topic. How can we break it down in ways that are simple for them to understand so that they can make meaningful impact for their own lives and then collectively as a community? Then the last one is carbon offsets, because sometimes you can't get all the way to zero with things without investing maybe in a reduction somewhere else than what you're using in order to get there. And so that is a mechanism that ultimately is employed by a number of communities and a number of businesses that are looking at ambitious environmental goals. So before we dive into the progress, let's refresh where our emissions actually come from as a community. And what's interesting here is that if you look at the residential piece, right, the residential is about 15% of the pie from a natural gas and an electricity perspective. Yes, transportation is a residential factor as well. There's both commercial and, I would call it, individuals using the streets and using it from a transportation standpoint. But we are dominated in our community by usage of energy from an industrial and commercial standpoint. It's a blessing in a way, right? When you think about the fact that we have such a vibrant and robust industry base that crosses a number of different segments in our community. So we have that, but when we measure our community from an emissions standpoint, we're thinking about the energy usage per capita, per person in the community. So it really puts that challenge in front of us that we're really absorbing a lot of energy and expressing it per person that comes from business as well. So to break it down again, electricity out of all those segments is about 50% of the pie. And then you've got about, about 33 or so percent maybe that's coming from natural gas, or a little shy, a little bit more of that. And then about that 16% that's coming from transportation. And the simple math really is to take the electricity use And we think about an emission factor. Our portfolio of resources has a certain carbon dioxide per megawatt hour that's emitted based upon the resources that are in our mix. We can essentially multiply that by your consumption of electricity and determine how many tons then we're emitting. Same thing on the natural gas side. Natural gas has a certain carbon per every therm that's burned, and so we can actually, again, multiply that together to get the tons of carbon dioxide there. And then a little bit more challenging on the vehicle side, we need to know how many vehicle miles are traveled, and then we need to know what the emission factor is for those that are operating still on gas. Knowing that when you think about, well, what about the electricity? Well, you're powering it, so it's part of the electricity sector now. It's kind of moved off from the vehicle sector and into the electricity sector. So if we can add up all three of those, now we can figure out what the total CO2 is, and then by knowing our population, we can divide that and look at it, by per capita. And so back in 2011, where did we start? We actually started by measuring 2010's results, and at that time, we were at 24 metric tons per capita in the city of Holland. And the plan showed that if we did nothing over the next 40 years, based upon the growth that we were going to see in industrial demand in our community, we were going to be at 37 tons per capita by 2050. And so a goal was created back then that said we want to be actually at 10 by 2050. And we've been measuring our progress along the way. So every few years, we started doing this actually in 2015 with the first measurement, and then every few years since then. And now you can start to see the divergent path that we have, where in 2015 we had made progress down to 22, where we were projected to go up to 25 in that do nothing scenario. And by 2018, we had dropped down to 19. Some of the significant changes that occurred there happened in our electric portfolio. We had shut down the DeYoung plant. That was a coal-fired plant. We had built Holland-area Park. That in of itself was a major change. But we still made change in other areas as well, and by 2020, we were down to 17. Well, we recently measured, and a little bit of an oops, maybe, right? But some things to think about when we go and dig a little bit deeper into this. We had a little bit of an uptick in that number. But again, this is a long-range plan, and I think we have to look deeper into what's going on in each of those 5 levers to understand what the implications were. And I think what you'll see here is that, what was 2020? Anything interesting happen in 2020, right? Right. So that affected consumption patterns dramatically, and I think has more to do with the blip than the 18 does. So let's take a look at that in more detail. So as far as the electric portfolio goes, where do we sit at this point? We talked about some of the conversions that have happened on our base supplies, but we've also rolled into our portfolio about a little over 16% renewable energy at this point. We have a number of contracts throughout the state of Michigan and the region, solar, wind, and landfill gas, which are all qualified as renewable resources under the state of Michigan's renewable portfolio standard. And we're exceeding the 15% level that the state had put in place. We're actively trying to add more to our portfolio. It has been a significant challenge coming out of COVID from a supply chain standpoint, as well as labor resource aspect. Some things that have occurred here, and I'll talk more detail about the energy law. I think I'll talk a little bit more about how some of those challenges are going to be coming forward. But even next month, we have 5 megawatt purchase of solar coming to our board and our city council. So we're continuing to layer in more of these opportunities as they become available and built in the state of Michigan. And we're doing a lot of that work through the Michigan Public Power Agency, which is a collective of 22 municipalities, each serving their community with electricity, so that we can do this at scale in a way that's more cost-effective for everyone. We also moved away from coal, as I mentioned before, and built the Holland-area Park through a very stakeholder-driven process. And as a result of that, we're actually able to lower our emission rate of our electric portfolio by 50%. Anybody there for that day? Was that anybody go and see the event? If you didn't see it, you probably heard it, right? So I was probably closer than I really needed to be, because I definitely felt the impact of that. So But very important date in the history of our community from an energy perspective. We also look at our rate competitiveness. Again, this plan is about the environment, but it's also about affordability and reliability. So how are we stacking up there? If you are a resident of the city of Holland that's buying electricity from us, this compared to DTE and Consumers Energy, you're probably keeping around $40 in your pocket every month, or about $500 a year as it relates to your electric bill. That's the kind of difference that you have. The rates for Consumers Energy and DTE are close to 20 cents per kilowatt hour now. And really across all customer classes, we are seeing that advantage. So good news is we're making progress, and we'll continue to make progress, and there's still a lot of room as it relates to the competitiveness. Not that we want to raise rates because there's room, but we want to keep that in mind, that there's opportunities here for us to add to the portfolio and still see a very competitive offering for energy. From a reliability standpoint, again, significantly outperforming the competition here. These numbers represent the frequency and the duration of outages that you experience in a year. SAIFI is a frequency, and SAIDI, D, a duration of an outage. So if you see, if you're a customer of the BPW, that 0.5 means that about half of our customers see one outage in a year. So half of them see none in a year, compared to the numbers from Consumers or DTE, which are above that one number. And then the duration is really where it stands out. And there you can see the average duration being around 36 minutes, both with and without major outages. And major means a very strange weather anomaly where a great number of the system customers are out. Consumers is somewhere between almost 200 minutes and as much as 500 minutes is more. So a lot of things there. So as it relates to building energy consumption, here's the story here from the energy update. You can see that from 2018, we've actually seen reductions in both the usage in commercial and in residential. Good progress being made there from 2018. 2020, we saw an uptick because it actually went down significantly in 2020. Why? Hotels weren't filled, restaurants weren't filled. A lot of other commercial institutions weren't during COVID. So we saw this big dip, and some of it came back, after 2020. But the progress over 2018 still shows very positive changes here. What probably stands out is the industrial, up 3%. Well, let's dig a little bit deeper into that. Okay, so the overall is a 6% increase from 2020, but for the reasons I mentioned. But 0 from 2018. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into the industry, though. This is the top 50 customers that we have in our system, and the size of the block has to do with the size of the usage for those customers. The red means that they've increased their usage from 2020. The green means they've decreased their usage. So some of the very large customers that we have are seeing some very significant growth. Food processing, Hudsonville Ice Cream, Request Foods, some of those companies are seeing some very significant growth. Advanced energy, lithium-ion batteries, LG, is going to be a very significant impact on us going forward. So when you look at some of those customers, it's not like they're not doing anything from an efficiency standpoint. It's that their growth from a production standpoint is outpacing the speed at which they can do improvements. So while a number of our customers, a lot more green blocks there than there are red blocks, some of the bigger red blocks are outperforming or outpacing some of the green block movement that's there. It's just a challenge for us as a community to make sure that we are being as, proactive at looking at what we can do to help those businesses. And we do. We have an individual, we have a whole department really that's an energy waste reduction department, but an engineer that will go out and help them with compressed air, leakage evaluations, other efficiency upgrades that they can do to see what they can do to improve their performance, because we want them to not only help from a carbon perspective, but we want them to be as cost effective in the use of their electricity so they can be as low a cost in making their products and as viable as they possibly can be. So what about the natural gas side? Well, it's pretty interesting on the natural gas side here. Again, residential is down from 2018, but is up significantly from 2020. Now, natural gas can be a lot more, I would say, weather dependent. But this is really where the big change has occurred. Since 2020, we've had overall in all those classes about a 20% increase in natural gas usage. So it's really not about the electricity, it's not about the makeup of our portfolio. The change really in this 20% would attribute that one metric ton per capita that we saw a bump from 2020. A lot of it has to do with the natural gas. It is still up from 2018, and again, some of that is the size and growth of some of our industries, but some of it also can be, a weather-related phenomenon that's there. So what about transportation? We are seeing some good progress on transportation. Matter of fact, since 2018, about every year, the amount of EVs in our community has doubled each year since 2018. And you might not think that there's a big impact associated with that, but for every vehicle that does convert from gas to electric, yes, you're going to add 2 tons for the electricity that you use in the portfolio that we have that's serving that electricity, unless you sign up for our renewable electricity option, so you can put 100% of your usage on renewable energy. But you're reducing 6 tons of carbon from the gasoline that you're avoiding. So the net impact is actually a reduction of 4 tons of carbon on an annual basis for converting to electric vehicles. Anybody in the room here have an electric vehicle? How many are considering an electric vehicle? Okay, for those that are considering an electric vehicle, we're here to help. We actually have not only incentive plans, we will incentivize $325 towards a charger in your home, and you could put it on a time of use rate that helps you save electricity by charging at night. But we also created now a guide for you. It's actually a vehicle toolkit, electric vehicle toolkit, where you can actually go out and pick the specific brand that you're looking at and what you're driving today, and it will give you an example of your annual savings on fuel and what your impact is going to be from an environmental standpoint. So you can do these evaluations now. We have these available for you, and you can get, this is the kind of output that you're going to get by putting your particular vehicle type in. It looks at our rate structures, so it's a very precise tool for evaluating for the BPW situation. The next lever is education. We are out in the community in lots of ways, and we're bringing the community into our facilities as well to help educate kids on energy-related issues through our visitor center at Holland Energy Park, going into different schools and helping to educate there as well. We're having days to promote electrification. Electrification is a path to decarbonization if you pair it with a lower emitting fuel source. So if you make a switch from a furnace to a heat pump, if you make a switch from gas-powered lawn equipment to an electric lawn equipment, these are things that help you in a journey towards decarbonization. And so we've been out there promoting and talking about letting people try. Come out and try one of these electric-powered lawn equipment so you can get a feel for it. Been at National Night Out and other community events. We've been doing our Adopt a Tree program where you can plant a shade tree to help you with some of your air conditioning needs placed correctly in your home or by your home. And we've been at the recent home show that we've had here in Holland where we were talking a lot about these different technologies from a heating and cooling perspective. And we are offering significant rebates if you do electrify. We're giving money towards the cost of some of those appliances or from a heating system in your home, a heating and cooling system in your home. So we're here to help as it relates to some of those things. As you're on your journey, we want to talk to you about those things. So how can you get started on that? We're also hopefully people are reading some of our sustainability articles in the Sentinel. We just had one recently about the electric vehicle toolkit that's out there. We're sending these mailers out, a number of these a year, these newsletters. A lot of people are opening these up. There's also email options for those as well, so you can actually get that and learn about what you can do in your home. Again, getting out and talking to businesses about the impacts of compressed air leakage, in factories and what that can do to an electricity utilization standpoint. And one of the most important ones for all of you that are in the audience today is Home Energy 101. Has anybody heard of Home Energy 101? Okay, how many have taken advantage of Home Energy 101? All right, good. Some of you have some work to do then, and I really encourage this. It's a way of getting hundreds of dollars of free stuff in your home along with education on what you can do to improve your efficiency. We are working with partners throughout the community. Maybe you are more familiar with some of these nonprofits. We have educated all of them on how to go into your home, help you identify opportunities in your home, leave with you a number of things that you can immediately use in your home from an efficiency standpoint. And what we find is that those that use this program are more likely to then do that next step of making an investment in something where they're actually filing for a rebate because they're making an energy efficiency improvement. Home Energy 101 can be found through our website. It's throughout our service territory. So it's not just a City of Holland thing. If you are in the Holland BPW territory, you can sign up for this program. It is sort of rooted in the Community Energy Plan ultimately, and so you can also access this through the City of Holland and Dan Broersma, who's the manager of sustainability within the City of Holland. So I encourage you either through the city's website or the Holland BPW's website to reach out and take advantage of this program. And then carbon offsets, the last one. We offer a renewable energy option in our rate structure. So you can elect up to 100% renewable energy today if you want to do that. We make sure that we have enough resources then to retire credits that would be used to offset your usage of electricity. And a lot of businesses do that today. They go out and some of them aren't buying it through the BPW, they're actually buying credits elsewhere as well. Carbon credits can also be bought. And when you're buying a carbon credit, you're often buying into something where people are making a demonstrable reduction in carbon somewhere else in the world that then they are claiming the credits for and then creating something that is a financially fungible, exchangeable type of product that you can sell back and forth. And so at a local level, the idea came up is what if you want to compensate for your impact locally? Let's say you're taking a trip somewhere and you know that that's going to have an impact from a global carbon perspective. Maybe you want to say, I'm going to put some money towards that so that something here locally can be done. Through the Outdoor Discovery Center and the Holland Zealand Community Foundation, there is a carbon offset pool that is being created and operated now where there is an opportunity for people to give into this fund so that local projects can be done to actually reduce carbon impact. And so if you have an interest in funding something where you feel like you have an impact from a carbon in a negative way and you want to actually see something positive happen as a result of that, you can actually invest in this program here at a local level that'll put money back into those type of initiatives. We doing all right? Okay. So that's what's going on in the plan where we are today. So looking ahead, if you think about the community energy plan, we have to try to get to a number of about 13 to 14 metric tons per capita by 2030 is the goal. And if we continue on this road of doing the renewable, 50% renewable, that's part of the state mandate, we'll be able to hopefully get there by that time, along with the vehicle conversion as well as energy efficiency upgrades in there. And all of that combined should put us on that goal ultimately of being below the metric ton goal by 2030 that we've identified. So do I still have time to do a little bit more? Okay, time for just Q&A at this point. Okay, because I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm sure, in the Q&A about the energy laws, and I'll try to get at some of that. I have some more slides in here that get at that. I apologize, I've gone a little bit long on that. Okay, well, that's good. So with that, as it's getting going here, let me just kind of start diving, and we'll just be as effective in the process as possible. Clean energy legislation was put in place here at the state of Michigan this last year, a package of bills, and some of the changes are pretty significant. So we're at this 15% level right now, and the goal by the state's mandate is to be at a 50% level by 2030, and then a 60% level by 2035. And at 2035, the same thing that what also comes in at that time is a clean energy standard. And a clean energy standard would require us to get to an 80% level. Well, what's clean energy? Clean energy is everything that's renewable, but also other non-emitting resources like nuclear. And natural gas can qualify, but only if it captures more than 90% of the carbon dioxide from the exhaust and sequesters it underground in formations that are underground. And so after 2035, we start hitting that type of mandate, which puts a lot of question in mind for us as a utility. We also have an increased energy waste reduction mandate. We're already working on a 2% level right now. So that's what the state has put in as a goal, with a 1.5% mandate for new energy efficiency upgrades for homes and businesses that we do that. And then also the state has recognized that electrification is also a pathway forward. The last bill that went through, and this is pretty important because up to this point, at our local level, we've had the ability to cite projects that determine whether or not there's a new solar array or a wind farm that's going to go in. At a state level now, this last bill that went through took some of that local control away. If you did not have what's called a renewable compatible ordinance, you would have to have a situation where then that could be appealed to the Public Service Commission, and they could rule that a solar farm or a wind farm was going to go in a particular area and kind of override the local control. This was, the legislature saw as a necessary thing to get past what has been a lot of local opposition for the siting of solar and wind, and what could be an impediment to achieving the statewide goals associated with the renewable energy standard going forward. So the Michigan Public Service Commission now, without having a local compatible ordinance, could allow for the siting of more than 50 megawatts of solar. Now, 50 megawatts of solar, it's really hard to get your hands around that. It takes about 7 acres of land for a megawatt of solar. So we're talking about 350 acres of land, so about 7 acres per megawatt, so about 350 acres of land for a 50 megawatt site associated with that. And over 100 megawatts of wind otherwise. So let's go ahead and let's get into some questions and answer. Maybe I can refer to some slides that help answer some questions that people have.
Okay. I'm noticing that the city of Holland has an emergency water supply agreement with Wyoming.
Yes.
And I know that because the pipeline goes past my house. Any comments?
Yeah, it's a really important infrastructure ad that we've had. And we had to utilize recently because we had an electrical outage at the plant, which required us to actually use that pipe. Fortunately, it was an off-season time frame, but it really is a nice thing. It's a 30-inch line that connects the two systems, and either one then, if the plant is down for an appreciable period of time, you know, that actually would supply us with that normal day usage. It wouldn't meet a peak day usage, but it's a really nice emergency and reliability enhancement that both communities decided to do. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, someone from the Michigan State Research up on the north side of the lake,
yeah.
we're talking about.
Yeah.
You talk about that?
I'll repeat it. So the question was, there's an organic battery discussion, you know, or organic material battery. Most of the batteries that are being deployed for energy usage, and let me get this chart here a little bit. I'll use this chart as a way to maybe talk about that answer. This is a chart that's coming out of the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. They're the grid operator here in the Midwest, and they ran some scenarios to look at what it would take to get to a 40, 60, or 80% reduction in carbon. And so if you look across here, this right-hand side, there's about 200 gigawatts of new investment that needs to occur to get there. And if you look, it's interesting that there's a lot of gas being added in order to make that carbon reduction occur. It's like, well, why is that necessary? There's also a lot of battery. See the 35 gigawatts of battery? But the battery that's there is the commercially available battery. And the commercially available battery today is that lithium-ion battery, the same thing that's going in powering vehicles. But in a distribution setting, that lithium-ion battery has about a 2 to 4 hour type of discharge cycle to it. That's not enough. You know, if solar is going to be a dominant source of electricity, there's a lot of times the sun's not there. You need a longer duration type of energy source. And that's where the organic battery that's being discussed is not the organic fluid is a new type of fluid, but the idea of a flow battery, it's called a flow battery. And that's where you have two different fluids, and then an exchange area, and the exchange unit size is really what determines the instantaneous amount of capacity that can come out of that battery. But the storage vessels that are holding the two fluids, if you just increase the size of those vessels, you got that much more storage capability from a discharge standpoint. So it's a beautiful thing when you think about the long-term storage. We need to work more on long-term storage in order to make renewable integration work, because the short-term storage will get us by certain intervals, but it really won't take care of some of the longer-term needs to integrate some of these intermittent resources that we have. So yeah, that's a technology that they're working on to try to make, I think, the battery, that flow battery technology more cost-effective.
It appeared that your service footprint is larger than the city of Holland. There's a number of customers outside the city. And are the fees generated outside the city all paid directly by the end user, or do the municipalities, the townships, also pay something in to partner with the city? And are the rates similar or the same in the city and out?
Correct. The rates are the same. The rates are exactly the same. Now, here's the good news if you're in the city of Holland, is that, so there's a dividend payment, right? So as a publicly owned entity, the city of Holland is able by charter to enjoy a reasonable dividend from the utility to the general fund, which helps keep your taxes in the city lower as a result of it. And that rate structure being the same from everyone, then on an electric standpoint, that means, in a way, some of the township residents are helping to support some of the functions that are being supplied by the general fund of the city of Holland as well. Which, again, I'm not going to sit here and make an argument one way or the other, but the city maintains a lot of services and amenities that are enjoyed by people outside the city as well, right? So I think that is a way where the township is helping to support, the operations from a local level. Plus, we get some economy of scale by serving outside the city. That helps, spread some of our fixed costs over a larger area. Yeah.
Can you, Dave, talk a little bit more about the 2040 deadline, and maybe are they considering doing the carbon capture to have us keep our newer the gas part of the power plant?
I'll use this slide here and the next one maybe to answer that as well. So one of the big challenges for us is not only are we in a situation where we're needing to make all these changes in our existing portfolio, but we're seeing a lot of growth. LG Energy Solution, with the changes that they've made and the additions, could very quickly become about 50% of our annual energy needs from an electricity standpoint. So the good news there is that the law is written in a way where we're able to actually comply by the use of what's called the credits, again, these certificates that go along with the energy source that's there. And so this graph really kind of shows, with that growth in electric demand, what our needs are going to be from meeting those targets. And up here, you can see that the red is sort of the other, meaning not clean energy or not renewable energy. The green is the renewable energy that's there, and then the blue is the clean energy standard. Another way of looking at it is this graph, which is showing that growth in our gap being the yellow area, and then the red on above it is the renewable energy credit gap, and then the clean energy gap. What you see here on the green is the LG Energy REC requirement. And the good news is the law was written in a way, and we asked for this to be added to the law. Unfortunately, they did put this in. Is they said, look, this is a huge risk for us. If we have to make these investments on behalf of that one company, and then something happens to that company, it could be a big financial burden to the city of Holland. So what we want to do is we want to be able to have that customer who's already today going out and investing in clean energy, be able to continue to do that and to make the contribution of those clean energy certificates against the BPW's requirement. And so that actually helps sort of shift the risk and keep some of the risk off the community by saying, in our relationship with LG, that they would commit to continuing to do those clean energy investments, and that those clean energy investments could be used to meet some of our obligations here. Still, with that being said, there's a big gap here, and yes, we have to look at not only renewable energy adds, but how to look at carbon capture and sequestration. Is that an option for us? You know, we know that, you know, there's a lot of costs involved with that, but there's also at a federal level some tax incentives, again, that we can take advantage of, even though we're not taxes, tax equivalent payments. And so we're going to be starting this year an integrated resource plan that's going to take and look at the constraints that we've been given and put into that model all the different options that we might have, including carbon capture and sequestration. What's missing from the state plan, though, is hydrogen, unfortunately. So we really don't have an option to look at co-blending hydrogen or something like that in there, but we have to look at that and along with all the other resource options and see what would yield the best outcome for us. And so that will be a plan that'll be kicking off this year and should give us a better pathway, knowing that there's a lot to happen between now and 2040, but it will be something that will give us some guidance on how to at least start that process and moving forward. Yeah, other questions people have?
First of all, congratulations on your very sophisticated and proactive approach to our utilities here in Holland area. And this question may be a little bit out of your purview, but I can't help but ask you. The current or our recent initiative for a group of folks that are proposing that the Ottawa County buy...
Hey, it's been great. Thank you. No, go ahead.
Yeah, if you're willing to speak to that. The other, my perspective on it is that I'm a retired environmental consultant, and the company that I work for bid on management of that power plant's fly ash impoundment area, and I can only tell you that that is a pending huge problem. So with that in mind.
So here's what I will say. You know, I mentioned how we're changing our portfolio. Holland, actually, through Michigan Public Power Agency, because the Michigan Public Power Agency back in late 1970s, or 1980s, bought into and so we actually receive about 10 megawatts of power through that relationship that we have. So I'm going to be careful with my words a little bit. And obviously, you know, I don't know what is going on in terms of the specific thought process that's there, but I will speak to it in terms of maybe good utility principles and then maybe not so good utility principles. Good utility principles involve diversification of your portfolio. I mean, you wouldn't make one investment in your one stock for your retirement account, right? But what's being contemplated, I think, is, you know, one asset to serve, you know, the county, and that asset is going to be challenged, as you mentioned, with liabilities, but also a lot of costs. You know, I don't know where you raise the money to actually do that and bond something like that in this day and age. So that's a challenge, number one. Two, the compromise that led to consumers shutting that plant down involved, if you're a Consumers Energy customer, I'm sorry to say this, but they are actually able to get cost recovery for that plant for the remaining what would have been its life, so 2040. So even though they're shutting it down early, they're still getting return on the investment till 2040. So Consumers is already earning that money. Why would they have any incentive to dispose of the plant any other way than to just earn it in their rate structure they already have? So again, these are things that are happening that I really am not as you know, aware of the particulars associated with it. But I would say it's challenging, and I wouldn't say that the formation from a utility standpoint would be the approach that you'd want to take in terms of forming a utility, you know, from the get-go.
He kind of asked my
Dave, I'd like to ask a question. It's probably a more truth or fiction daily practices kind of question. But I just recently heard a report that about microplastics getting into the water, and that actually the little plastic pods that we use in our dishwashers and some of us in our laundry are one of the main contributors to microplastics in the water. Does the BPW filter any of that out?
Yeah, so our filtration process at the water plant are pretty conventional, normal filtration processes that we've done for years. And some things could be small enough where we're not going to capture. It doesn't mean that we're not capturing any microplastics, right? We're not monitoring for that right now. So we don't have a standard that we're trying to meet, nor do we know where we're at in terms of a level right now. So the way that we approach things is the EPA and the state will promulgate certain contaminant levels that we have to meet, and then we have to monitor for those things. So, new things come down the road like, PFAS monitoring, right? So we started with monitoring for that, see where we are. And now we have these things that are being promulgated out of the state in terms of levels of PFAS. Microplastics might be a thing that comes down the road, but right now we don't have that. So we're not doing the monitoring to determine. I would say that in theory, there's some being absorbed by filtration that we have going on, but I couldn't sit here and say that that's a great quantity of it, or to be able to express from a health standard perspective what would be the level that we should be at from a public water system perspective at this point. So I think more study has to come on that. I know that's an emerging topic. I'm just not in a place right now to be able to give you something definitive on that to say, here's where we're at on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. I can repeat it. Go ahead.
Are you promoting solar power installations on homes
Yeah.
and businesses and industry?
Yeah, so the question was, are we promoting solar power on homes and businesses and industries? And yes, I should say we are facilitating that. We have what's called a distributed generation policy, and that distributed generation policy looks at a fairly streamlined installation application that you would have to make an investment in your home. Then what we do is we value the solar coming back off the home based upon the current market conditions that exist for power. So we'll look at what kind of value you bring in terms of the capacity that we need to serve our customers. We'll look at the energy value that array is bringing. And that will actually be the value that we put on the output that goes beyond your home usage. Now, everything that you do from a usage to offset your home use is offsetting the entirety of your retail bill from that standpoint. But really what changes is when you start going beyond what your home needs and now you're pushing it back out, that credit is based upon what value you bring to the electric utility, which changes every year based upon the market conditions and where we are as a need for new capacity. So that's something that gets updated, again, on that annual basis and put in there. So I'd ask, as you look at solar on your home, please reach out to us so that we can give you the best information possible about what your potential savings are going to look like. Sometimes when a solar array manufacturer comes in and proposes something for your home, they have very standard expectations on what that looks like, and sometimes that isn't exactly what the situation is going to look like for our system. So we don't want you to be making an investment based upon one set of assumptions, and then the reality is something different. So just want to make sure that you do reach out to us if you're looking at that. Other questions? Or
I think we're done.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending. A special thank you again for Dave Koster. Please put your hands together one more time. Can I have a show of hands? How many people have not yet had their photograph taken for the roster? Raise your hands. Ralph is waiting for you in the South Hall. Those of you who are writers, poets, photographers, artists, the HASP review is still looking for submissions. Have at it. Please submit. Next month, we'll have a special visit from the FBI. Not to investigate us, by the way. Special Agent Brett Mason will be here to talk about domestic terrorism, because it's quite obviously a worldwide problem, and it's a problem here in America too. We've all seen it. So it should be very interesting. Keep in touch with HASP happenings. It'll bring you updated on any news that's going on with HASP. And that's all I have to say, so class is dismissed.